The gunshot echoed across the plains as Zara Morgan frantically barricaded the door of her modest homestead, her 3 children huddled behind her in terror. At 32, the widow had grown accustomed to fending for herself in the unforgiving Colorado Territory of 1875, but tonight was different. Tonight, she might not survive. "Mama, they're coming back," whispered 8-year-old Emma, her blue eyes wide with fear as she clutched her 5-year-old twin siblings, Liam and Lucy, to her sides. "Hush now," Zara breathed, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear as she pressed her eye to a crack in the wooden shutters. The Blackwell Gang had been terrorizing homesteaders across the county for months, and now they'd set their sights on her small ranch. Her husband Thomas had been dead for 3 years. Pneumonia had taken him quickly, leaving her alone with 3 small children and 80 acres of stubborn land that barely yielded enough to keep them fed. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her blood run cold. She reached for the rifle above the mantel, Thomas's old Winchester. She'd become a decent shot out of necessity, but against 5 armed outlaws she knew her chances were slim. "Get under the bed, all of you," she ordered, her voice steadier than her hands. "Don't come out until I call for you." As the children scrambled to obey, Zara positioned herself by the window, rifle ready. The hoofbeats grew louder, then stopped. She counted 4. No, 5 riders silhouetted against the setting sun. The leader, a hulking figure with a distinctive hat, dismounted and strode toward her door. Zara took aim, her finger tensing on the trigger. Then, from the direction of the creek, came the unmistakable sound of more riders approaching fast. The Blackwell Gang turned, startled by the newcomers. Gunfire erupted, but not aimed at her house. Through the crack in the shutters, Zara watched as the gang scattered, firing wildly at the newcomers before fleeing into the gathering darkness. For several minutes silence fell. Zara remained frozen, rifle still trained on the door. A knock came, firm but not threatening. "Madam? You folks all right in there?" The voice was deep, with a slight drawl, unfamiliar, but somehow reassuring. Zara didn't answer immediately, her heart still pounding in her chest. "Those men won't be back tonight," the voice continued. "Name's Archer Hayes. I'm riding with Marshal Davis from Willow Creek. We've been tracking the Blackwell Gang since they hit the stagecoach at Eagle Pass." Cautiously, Zara approached the door, rifle still ready. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" A pause. "Fair question, madam. I'm going to slide my deputy badge under your door, if that's all right." True to his word, a silver star appeared in the gap beneath her door. Zara picked it up, examining it carefully before unlatching the door just enough to peer out. The man standing on her porch was tall and broad-shouldered, his face partly shadowed by his hat. What she could see of his features were weathered by sun and wind, with several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. Behind him stood 3 other men, all mounted and watchful. "Where's the marshal?" Zara asked, still suspicious. "Took a bullet in the shoulder. He's with the doctor in Willow Creek. Asked me and the boys to keep tracking. We got word the gang was headed this way." His eyes, a startling blue even in the dim light, met hers directly. "You got children in there, madam?" "Yes," she admitted reluctantly. "Then you'll want to know those men are likely to circle back. They've been hitting isolated homesteads all through the territory." He glanced back at his companions. "We can set up watch tonight, make sure they don't return. Come morning, you might want to consider heading to town until we bring them in." Zara's grip tightened on the rifle. "This is my home. I'm not abandoning it." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Didn't figure you for the type that scares easy." He extended his hand for the badge. "May I?" Zara returned it, still keeping the door mostly closed. "You can use the barn for your horses," she offered finally. "I can spare some coffee, but not much else." "That's more than generous, Mrs. Morgan." "Zara Morgan." "Thank you, Mrs. Morgan. We'll try not to be a bother." He touched the brim of his hat respectfully before turning to give instructions to his men. Zara closed the door, leaning against it for a moment before calling her children out from their hiding place. As she lit the lamps and set water to boil for coffee, she found herself glancing repeatedly at the window, watching the silhouettes of the men as they settled in for the night. It had been a long time since she'd felt protected rather than alone against the world. "Who are they, Mama?" Emma asked, helping to set out cups. "Lawmen," Zara replied. "Here to help us." It wasn't until later, as she tucked her children into bed, that Zara realized she hadn't felt this safe since before Thomas died. The thought troubled her more than it should have. Dawn broke clear and cold over the Morgan homestead. Zara had slept fitfully, rising several times to check on the children and peek through the shutters at the men keeping watch. Now, as she stoked the fire and began preparing a simple breakfast of cornbread and the last of their bacon, she steeled herself for the conversation ahead. A knock at the door announced Deputy Hayes. He stood respectfully on her porch, hat in hand, his presence somehow filling the doorframe without seeming threatening. "Morning, Mrs. Morgan. Just wanted to let you know we're heading out to scout the area. Those men could still be nearby." In the morning light, Zara could see him more clearly. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps in his mid-30s, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting into the sun and a life lived outdoors. His dark hair was overdue for a trim, and his clothes were trail-worn but clean. "I was just making breakfast," she found herself saying. "There's not much, but you and your men are welcome to it before you go." Surprise, then gratitude flickered across his face. "That's mighty kind, but we wouldn't want to take food from your children. It's the least I can do after you drove those men off." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please." Minutes later, her small table was crowded with 4 grateful men devouring the modest meals she'd prepared. The children, initially shy, soon warmed to the visitors, especially to Archer, who answered their excited questions with patient good humor. "Do you catch bad guys all the time?" Liam asked, eyes wide with admiration. "Some days," Archer replied, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Other days, I just ride around looking important." Lucy giggled, hiding her face in her hands. "How many men have you shot?" Liam pressed, earning a sharp look from his mother. "Not nearly as many as the dime novels would have you believe," Archer answered carefully. "A gun's a last resort, son, not something to be proud of using." Zara gave him an appreciative nod as she refilled coffee cups. "Mrs. Morgan," one of the other deputies said, "Deputy Hayes is right about those men coming back. The Blackwells don't take kindly to being run off. They've burned out folks who've crossed them. We've got a wagon coming from town later today," Archer added, his tone careful. "We'd feel better if you and your children would consider staying in Willow Creek, just until we bring these men in." Zara's jaw tightened. "And how long might that be? A week? A month?" "I have livestock to tend, crops that need attention." "I understand," Archer said, and something in his voice made her believe he truly did. "Your neighbors, the Hendersons about 3 miles east, have already gone to town. Several of us are taking turns checking on their property. We could do the same for yours." She wanted to refuse outright. Since Thomas died, she'd prided herself on her independence, on never accepting charity or admitting defeat. But as her gaze fell on her children, the reality of her situation sank in. She had no right to risk their safety for the sake of her pride. "Very well," she said finally. "We'll go to town. But I'll be back every few days to check on things." "Fair enough," Archer agreed. "The wagon should be here by midday. There's room at the boarding house, and Marshal Davis will see to it that you're not charged." "I can pay my own way," Zara insisted. Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "Never doubted it for a minute, Mrs. Morgan." As the men prepared to leave, Archer lingered a moment longer. "Your husband," he began awkwardly. "Is he dead?" Zara said flatly. 3 years now. Pneumonia." He nodded, his expression solemn. "I'm sorry for your loss. He must have been a good man." "He was," she agreed, throat suddenly tight. The best. Archer touched the brim of his hat in a respectful gesture. We'll be back with that wagon. Try not to worry, Mrs. Morgan. We'll get this sorted out. As she watched him mount up and ride out with his men, Zara was struck by the odd sensation that her life had just shifted in some fundamental way. She quickly dismissed the thought. Her focus needed to be on her children's safety and preserving their home, not on blue eyes and a gentle manner that had somehow pierced the armor she'd built around her heart. The journey to Willow Creek was tense, with Archer and his men forming a protective escort around the wagon carrying Zara and her children. Every distant sound made her reach for the rifle laid across her lap, and she caught Archer watching her with what looked like respect each time she did. Willow Creek proved larger than Zara had expected, a proper town with a main street lined with businesses, a schoolhouse, church, and even a small theater. It had been nearly a year since she'd last visited, preoccupied as she was with the endless work of maintaining her homestead alone. The boarding house was clean and welcoming, run by a plump, cheerful widow named Mrs. Abernathy who fussed over the children immediately. "Gracious, they're thin as rails!" she exclaimed, already planning how to fatten them up. "Don't you worry about a thing, Mrs. Morgan. They'll be well looked after here." Zara felt a strange mixture of gratitude and resentment at the woman's kindness. Part of her wanted to protest that she'd done her best to keep her children fed and healthy despite the hardships, but she bit back the words. Pride wouldn't serve her here. Archer escorted them to their rooms personally, carrying their single trunk up the stairs. "Marshal Davis would like to speak with you tomorrow, if you're willing," he said as he set the trunk down. "He's recovering at Doc Wilson's place just down the street." "Of course," Zara agreed, surveying the modest but comfortable room that would be home to her and Emma, while the twins would share the adjoining space. "When do you expect to resolve this situation with the Blackwell Gang?" Archer's expression grew serious. "Hard to say. They're slippery, and they know the territory well. But we've got men watching all the major trails, and word's out to every settlement within 50 miles. He hesitated. "Mrs. Morgan, I don't want to alarm you, but there's something you should know. The Blackwells have a particular grudge against homesteaders who've taken up land they consider their territory. Your place sits on what used to be open range they used for moving stolen cattle." A chill ran through her. "Are you saying they targeted us specifically?" "It's possible. Which is why it's good you're here now." His eyes met hers directly. "I promise you, we'll do everything in our power to make sure they face justice." Something in his tone, a personal note of determination, caught her attention. "You sound like this is more than just your job, Deputy Hayes." A shadow crossed his face. "The Blackwells killed a family near Fort Collins last year. Friends of mine. Good people." He seemed about to say more, then shook his head slightly. "Get some rest, Mrs. Morgan. Town's safe, but if you need anything, the marshal's office is just across the square." After he left, Zara sat on the edge of the bed, watching her children explore the room with excited curiosity. It had been so long since they'd experienced anything beyond their isolated homestead, and despite the circumstances, she couldn't help but be grateful for this small gift of normalcy, the chance for them to see other children, to attend a proper school for a few days, to remember there was a world beyond their daily struggle for survival. Yet as night fell and she tucked them into unfamiliar beds, her thoughts returned to her home vulnerable and unprotected. And despite herself, to the deputy with the watchful blue eyes who had promised to keep it safe. The following days established an unexpected rhythm to their displaced lives. The children were enrolled in the local school, thrilled by the novelty of classmates and a real teacher. Zara found herself with time on her hands, a strange luxury after years of dawn to dusk labor. On her third day in town, she visited the marshal's office, determined to learn more about the threat to her home, and when she might reasonably expect to return. Marshal Davis, his arm in a sling, greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Morgan, please sit down. I was hoping to see you." Though pale from his injury, the marshal's sharp eyes and firm handshake spoke of a man accustomed to authority. "I appreciate the town's hospitality, Zara began. But I need to know how long you expect this situation to continue. I have a farm to run. The marshal nodded, understanding. Deputy Hayes mentioned you were eager to return. He also mentioned you're quite capable with that Winchester of yours. I do what's necessary to protect what's mine, she replied simply. Indeed. The marshal leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Morgan, I won't mislead you. The Blackwell Gang is the worst threat this territory has faced in years. They've killed at least 7 people that we know of, including a U.S. Marshal near Laramie. Zara felt her stomach tighten. And you believe they have specific interest in my property? Archer, Deputy Hayes thinks so, yes. Your land sits on what they consider their route for moving stolen cattle to buyers in Kansas. He studied her face. It's not just about your safety anymore. We believe with the right precautions, your homestead might actually help us set a trap for these men. A trap? Zara repeated, incredulous. Using my home and possibly my family as bait? Not your family. The marshal clarified quickly. You and the children would remain here. But if we put out word that you're making regular visits to check on your property, the Blackwells might see an opportunity. We'd have men positioned to intercept them. Zara stood abruptly. Absolutely not. I won't have my home turned into a battlefield. Madam, with respect, it already is. They've marked your place. If we don't stop them now, you'll never be truly safe there. She wanted to argue further, but the logic of his words struck her silent. After a moment, she asked, What exactly would this plan entail? Deputy Hayes and 2 men would accompany you on regular, visible visits to your property. Other deputies would be hidden nearby. If the Blackwells take the bait, we'll be ready. And if they don't? How long are we supposed to continue this charade? The marshal sighed. I can't answer that. But I can tell you that Archer Hayes is the best deputy I've ever worked with. If anyone can bring these men to justice, it's him. Zara sat back down, mind racing. I need to think about this. Of course. But not too long. Every day those men remain free is another day innocent people are at risk. As she left the marshal's office, Zara nearly collided with Archer, who was just arriving. Mrs. Morgan. He greeted her, touching his hat. Everything all right? The marshal just informed me of your plan to use my home as bait for murderers, she said bluntly. Archer winced. I'd hoped to discuss that with you myself. It's not as reckless as it sounds. Really? Because using my property to lure armed killers sounds precisely reckless to me. He glanced around the busy street. May I walk with you? This isn't a conversation for public ears. Reluctantly, she nodded, and they fell into step together, heading toward the small park at the edge of town. The plan was my idea, Archer admitted once they were away from curious listeners. But I wouldn't have suggested it if I didn't believe it could work and if I wasn't personally committed to ensuring your home remains intact. Why is this so important to you? Zara asked, studying his face. The marshal mentioned you believe this gang specifically targeted my property, but there's something more, isn't there? Archer was silent for several steps. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, more personal than she'd heard before. The family I mentioned, my friends who were killed by the Blackwells, it was the Thompsons. Sarah Thompson was my sister. Zara stopped walking, the pieces suddenly falling into place. I'm so sorry. Their boy, my nephew James, survived by hiding in a root cellar. He's 10 now, living with my parents in Denver. Archer's eyes had a faraway look. I promised him I'd bring the men responsible to justice. And you believe using my home will help you do that? I believe it's our best chance, yes. He turned to face her directly. Mrs. Morgan, I understand your concerns. This is your home, your livelihood. But these men won't stop. They've marked you, and sooner or later they'll be back whether we're ready or not. Zara took a deep breath, weighing her options. The thought of her home being used this way revolted her, but the alternative, living in perpetual fear or abandoning the land entirely, was equally unacceptable. If I agree, she said finally, I have conditions. First, no matter what happens, my children stay here in town safe. Second, I come with you on these visits, it's my property, and I won't be sidelined. Third, when this is over, the law helps me repair any damage done. Surprise registered on Archer's face, followed by respect. I expected the first two conditions, but I hadn't considered the third. It's more than fair. I'll speak to the marshal. One more thing, Zara added. If we're to work together on this, I think we should dispense with formalities. My name is Zara. A small smile touched his lips. Archer, he replied, offering his hand. As they shook, Zara couldn't help but notice the contrast, his hand large and calloused, engulfing her smaller one, which bore its own marks of hard work. For a brief moment, something passed between them, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of shared determination, of understanding what it meant to fight for what mattered. We'll start tomorrow, he said as they resumed walking. If you're certain. I'm certain I want my life back, Zara replied firmly. Whatever it takes. What it took, as it happened, was patience. For 2 weeks, Zara rode out to her homestead every third day, accompanied by Archer and 2 deputies. They made a show of checking the property, tending to the livestock that remained, and making minor repairs. Each time, they departed before sunset, returning to the safety of town. There was no sign of the Blackwell Gang. Yet despite the tension of waiting for an attack that never came, Zara found herself looking forward to these excursions. Away from the curious eyes of townspeople, she and Archer fell into an easy companionship, working side by side to maintain her property while the other deputies kept watch. You've done well here, Archer commented one afternoon as they repaired a section of fence. Most widows would have sold out and moved to town. That's what my father-in-law wanted, Zara admitted, holding a post steady while Archer secured it. He offered to buy the place after Thomas died, said a woman couldn't manage it alone. That just made me more determined to prove him wrong. Archer chuckled. I'm starting to think there's not much you can't do when you set your mind to it. There's plenty, she countered, wiping sweat from her brow. I'm a terrible seamstress. Can't bake a decent pie to save my life. And apparently I'm not very good at keeping outlaws away from my property. That last one's not your responsibility, he said seriously. It's mine. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Zara felt the strange tension that had been building between them over the past weeks, a connection that went beyond their shared purpose. What will you do? She asked suddenly. After you catch these men? Archer seemed surprised by the question. Keep doing my job, I suppose. The territory's not short on trouble. Here? In Willow Creek? He drove another nail into the fence post before answering. I haven't decided. I've been thinking about heading back to Colorado, maybe start a place of my own someday. He glanced at her. What about you? After this is over? Back to work, she said simply. The children need stability. This land is all we have. And what about what you need? He asked quietly. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years, perhaps not since Thomas was alive. She'd been so focused on survival, on providing for her children, that her own needs had become irrelevant. I need to know my children are safe, she said finally. That's enough. Archer looked as though he wanted to say more, but the approach of one of the other deputies interrupted the moment. No sign of anyone, the man reported. Same as every other day. They're watching, Archer replied confidently. Waiting for us to get complacent. We need to keep to the plan. As they rode back to town that evening, Zara found herself stealing glances at Archer's profile against the setting sun. For the first time in 3 years, she was experiencing feelings she thought had died with Thomas, and the realization terrified her. In town, life had taken on a new dimension for the Morgan family. Emma and the twins were thriving in school, making friends and soaking up knowledge like parched earth drinks rain. Zara, meanwhile, had reluctantly accepted a temporary position helping at the mercantile, which allowed her to earn enough to cover their extended stay without depleting her meager savings. It was during one of her shifts that she overheard a conversation that chilled her blood. "Heard they hit another place yesterday," a grizzled miner was telling the store owner as Zara stocked shelves nearby. "Homestead just north of Eagle Pass. Killed the man, took everything worth taking, then burned it to the ground." "Blackwell's?" the shopkeeper asked in a hushed tone. "Has to be. Same pattern." "They're working their way this direction again." Zara's hands trembled as she continued her work, straining to hear more. "Marshall's deputy was in earlier," the shopkeeper continued. "Said they've got a plan to catch him, using that widow's place out by Copper Creek as bait." The miner spat into a nearby spittoon. "That Morgan woman? Damn fool plan if you asked me. Them Blackwells ain't gonna fall for such an obvious trap. Unless that's exactly what Hayes is counting on." The shopkeeper mused. "Man's smarter than he lets on." Zara slipped away, heart pounding. Word of their plan had spread through town. If townspeople knew, how long before the Blackwells learned of it too? She needed to find Archer immediately. She found him at the livery stable, checking his horse's shoe. "They know," she said without preamble, drawing him aside. "The whole town's talking about the plan to trap the Blackwells at my place." Archer's expression darkened. "Damn. I was afraid of this. Small towns and secrets don't mix well." He straightened up, decision made. "This changes things. If they know we're setting a trap, they'll either avoid your place entirely or come in much more aggressively than we're prepared for. What do we do now?" He thought for a moment. "We need to change the narrative. Make them think we've abandoned the plan." His eyes met hers. "You need to be seen preparing to leave town, packing up, saying goodbyes, making it clear you're giving up on your homestead." "But I'm not giving up," Zara protested. "Of course not. It's just for show. Meanwhile, I'll quietly position men at your property tonight. If the Blackwells are watching, they might see an opportunity to hit your place one last time before you sell." The plan made sense, but something still troubled her. "And where will I be during all this?" "Safe in town with your children," Archer said firmly. "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "This is my home we're talking about. I won't sit in town while others fight my battles. Zara, these men are killers, and I'm a woman who's tired of being underestimated." She cut in. "I can shoot, Archer. You've seen me. And I know every inch of that property better than anyone." They stared at each other, locked in silent battle, until finally Archer sighed. "The marshal will have my badge for this," he muttered. "But fine. You can come. The children stay with Mrs. Abernathy." "Agreed. And you follow my orders without question. As long as your orders make sense," she countered. A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "You are the most stubborn woman I've ever met." "So I've been told," Zara replied, unable to prevent a small smile of her own. As they worked out the details of their revised plan, Zara felt a surge of something unexpected, not just determination or courage, but a kind of exhilaration. For 3 years, she had been reacting to life's hardships, simply trying to survive. Now, she was taking action, fighting back. And she wasn't fighting alone. That night, after ensuring her children were settled with Mrs. Abernathy, under the pretense that she needed to finish packing for their departure, the next day, Zara met Archer and 3 deputies at the edge of town. They rode in silence, taking a circuitous route to approach her property from the west, where the dense cottonwood trees along the creek would provide cover. The homestead looked eerily peaceful in the moonlight. Archer deployed his men with hand signals, one to the barn, one to the root cellar that provided a clear view of the approach, the third to a position behind the house. "You and I will be in the house," he told Zara in a whisper as they crouched in the shadows. "If they come, they'll check there first." Inside, the house was dark and still. Zara felt a strange disconnect, seeing her home as a battlefield rather than the sanctuary it had once been. They positioned themselves near windows, Archer at the front, Zara at the side facing the barn with clear views but protected from immediate sight. "Now we wait," Archer whispered. Hours passed. The moon traversed the sky, casting shifting shadows across the yard. Twice, Zara's eyelids grew heavy, only to snap open at the slightest sound. Around 3 in the morning, an owl hooted nearby, making her jump. "Easy," Archer murmured from his position. "Just night sounds." "What if they don't come?" Zara whispered back. "Then we try again tomorrow. And the next day if necessary." Another hour crawled by. Zara's back ached from maintaining her vigilant posture, but she refused to complain. Then, just as the first hint of pre-dawn gray touched the eastern horizon, Archer tensed. "Movement," he breathed. "Eastern approach. At least 3 riders." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs as she strained to see. Yes, their dark shapes moving slowly toward the house, using the trees for cover. Archer made a subtle gesture with his hand, a signal to the deputies hidden outside. Then he moved silently to Zara's side. "They'll likely split up," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. 2 to the house, 1 to check the barn. When they enter, let them get fully inside before we move. Understood?" She nodded, gripping her rifle with suddenly sweaty hands. The minutes that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. Zara could hear the soft crunch of boots on dirt, the creak of the porch step, low voices conferring outside. Then the door handle turned slowly. The door swung open, and 2 figures slipped inside, hulking shadows against the gray pre-dawn light. They moved with the confidence of men who believe the house empty, not bothering to check corners or secure the space. "Looks clear," one muttered. "Let's get what we can and burn the rest. Teach that widow a lesson about cooperating with the law." "Now!" Archer called out, simultaneously striking a match to light the lamp beside him. Light flooded the room, revealing 2 startled outlaws, one tall and lean, the other stocky and bearded. Both reached for their guns. "Don't move!" Archer ordered, his revolver steady. "You're under arrest." For a heartbeat, it seemed they might comply. Then the bearded one dove sideways, firing wildly as he sought cover behind the table. Chaos erupted. Zara ducked as bullets splintered the wall beside her. She heard shouting outside, more gunfire. Archer returned fire, his shots measured and precise. The tall outlaw crumpled with a cry, clutching his shoulder. The bearded one kept shooting, forcing Archer to take cover. In that moment, Zara saw the bearded man shift position, bringing his gun to bear on Archer's exposed side. Without thinking, she stepped into view and fired. The outlaw jerked, his shot going wide, before collapsing to the floor. More gunshots sounded from outside, then silence. "Zara?" Archer's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "Are you hit?" "No," she managed, suddenly aware she was shaking. "You?" "I'm fine." He moved quickly to secure the wounded outlaws, kicking away their weapons before checking for signs of life. "This one's alive," he said of the tall man. "Your man's breathing too, but he needs a doctor." The door burst open as one of the deputies rushed in. "We got one outside," he reported. "Barrett took a bullet in the arm, but he'll live." 2 more riders fled East Jefferson's in pursuit. "Blackwell?" Archer asked sharply. "No sign of him. Must have sent his men to do the dirty work." Zara sank into a chair, the rifle heavy in her trembling hands. She had shot a man. The reality of it washed over her in a cold wave. Archer knelt beside her, gently taking the weapon. "You did what you had to do," he said quietly. "You saved my life." She looked up at him, his features sharp in the lamplight. "It's not over, is it?" "Their leader is still out there. We'll find him," Archer promised. "But we've dealt them a serious blow tonight. These men will face justice for their crimes." As dawn broke fully, the homestead became a flurry of activity. The wounded outlaws were bound and loaded into a wagon for transport to town. Archer sent a deputy ahead to fetch the doctor and inform the marshal of their partial success. Zara moved through the aftermath in a daze, cataloging the damage to her home: broken windows, bullet holes in the walls, her mother's cherished rocking chair splintered beyond repair. Yet beneath the shock and lingering fear, she felt something unexpected: pride. She had stood her ground. She had fought for her home. She had survived. By mid-morning, Marshal Davis himself arrived with reinforcements and a grim determination to capture the remaining gang members. "You did good work here," he told Archer and Zara as they stood on the porch. "Those men have already started talking, hoping for leniency. We've got names, locations. It won't be long before we have Blackwell himself." "What happens now?" Zara asked. "No," the marshal said firmly. "You and your children can come home. We'll keep a deputy posted here for a few days as precaution, but I believe the immediate threat has passed." Relief flooded through her, a sensation so powerful it made her knees weak. Home. They could come home. As the marshal organized the departure of prisoners and deputies, Archer lingered on the porch with Zara. "I should thank you," she said, watching the activity in her yard, "for everything you've done." "I was just doing my job," he replied, though they both knew it had become more than that. "What will you do now?" she asked, echoing their earlier conversation. Archer gazed out at the land stretching beyond her homestead. "The marshals asked me to stay on in Willow Creek, at least until we bring in Blackwell. After that—" he hesitated. "I haven't decided." Something in his tone made Zara look at him more closely. "But you're considering options?" "I am." His eyes met hers, and the connection that had been building between them throughout this ordeal seemed to crystallize into something tangible. "Zara, Deputy Hayes," one of the men called from the yard. "Marshal needs you." Archer's jaw tightened in frustration. "We'll talk later," he promised before striding away. Left alone on the porch, Zara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly uncertain of what she wanted that conversation to entail. She had sworn after Thomas died that she would never depend on a man again, that she would raise her children and run her farm on her own terms. Yet here she was, unexpectedly drawn to a man who represented everything she'd convinced herself she didn't need. The question that had haunted her for days resurfaced. Once this was truly over, what did she want for herself? For the first time in 3 years, she allowed herself to consider that the answer might include more than just survival. 2 days later, the Morgan family returned home in a wagon laden with their few possessions from town. The children were ecstatic, running from room to room as if rediscovering a long-lost treasure, oblivious to the bullet holes and damaged furniture that Zara noted with a practiced eye. True to the marshal's word, a deputy was stationed on the property, a young man named Collins who pitched a tent near the barn and kept a respectful distance unless needed. Archer, Zara learned, had ridden out with a posse following a new lead on Blackwell's whereabouts. Life gradually returned to its familiar rhythms, though Zara found herself jumping at unexpected sounds and checking the horizon more frequently than before. The children, resilient as always, seemed to bounce back quickly, incorporating their adventure in town into their play but otherwise returning to their chores and lessons without apparent trauma. A week passed. Then another. News came that 2 more members of the Blackwell Gang had been captured near the Kansas border, but their leader remained elusive. Zara told herself it was relief she felt each time she saw a rider approaching, only to be disappointed when it wasn't Archer. She kept busy with repairs to the house, catching up on neglected farm work, and trying not to think about the conversation they never finished. It was nearly a month after the shootout when she looked up from hanging laundry to see a familiar figure on horseback cresting the hill from town. Her heart skipped as she recognized Archer's broad-shouldered silhouette against the sky. He rode slowly, as if in no hurry, or perhaps giving her time to see him coming. Emma noticed too, pausing in her task of helping with the younger children's lessons on the porch. "It's Deputy Hayes!" she called excitedly. The twins immediately abandoned their slates and ran to the edge of the yard, waving enthusiastically. By the time Archer dismounted at the hitching post, all 3 children had surrounded him, bombarding him with questions and updates on their lives since returning home. "Did you catch the bad men?" Liam demanded. Are you staying for supper? Lucy asked, tugging his sleeve. I caught most of them, Archer answered with a patient smile, ruffling Liam's hair. And I'd be honored to stay for supper, if your mother's offering. He looked past the children to where Zara stood, suddenly conscious of her work-worn dress and hair escaping its pins. If that's all right, he added, his voice softening. Of course, she managed, gesturing toward the house. We don't have much, but you're welcome to share it. The afternoon passed in a blur of domestic activity. Archer helped split wood and repair a loose board on the porch while Zara prepared a simple meal of rabbit stew and the last of the cornbread. The children chattered incessantly, thrilled by the novelty of a visitor, and Zara found herself noticing how naturally Archer engaged with them, answering questions, showing Liam how to properly hold an axe, complimenting Emma on her reading progress. It wasn't until after supper, when the children were occupied with their evening chores, that Zara and Archer finally had a moment alone on the porch. You look well, he said, breaking the slightly awkward silence. All of you. You've made good progress on the repairs. We manage, she replied, then added more softly. Thank you for checking on us. Archer shifted, clearly moving towards something more significant than pleasantries. Zara, there's news. We caught Blackwell 2 days ago trying to cross into New Mexico territory. He's in custody in Santa Fe, awaiting transfer to Denver for trial. Relief washed over her. So it's truly over? It is. He smiled, the tension he'd been carrying in his shoulders visibly easing. Your testimony and that of the other homesteaders he targeted will ensure he never sees freedom again. And the men who actually attacked my home? Facing similar charges. The one you shot Miller will likely hang. The others cooperating might get life instead of the noose. Zara absorbed this, surprised to find she felt no satisfaction at the thought of executions, only a profound gratitude that the threat was eliminated. And what about you? She asked. Now that your mission is accomplished? Archer looked out across her land, bathed in the golden light of approaching sunset. That's partly why I came today. The marshal offered me a permanent position in Willow Creek. Town's growing, needs a steady lawman presence. That's wonderful, Zara said, ignoring the strange twist in her stomach. You'd be good at it. I turned it down. She blinked in surprise. Why? Archer turned to face her fully. Because I've spent 5 years of my life hunting down men like Blackwell, moving from town to town, never putting down roots. After what happened to my sister and her family. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I thought justice was all that mattered. But these past weeks, spending time here with you and your children, seeing how you've built something meaningful despite everything, it made me realize what I really want. And what is that? Zara asked, hardly daring to breathe. A home. Land of my own. A purpose beyond a badge. His blue eyes held hers steadily. The thing is, Zara, I can't stop thinking about you. About your strength, your determination. The way you've raised those children alone, made this place thrive against all odds. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. Archer, please let me finish, he said gently. I know it's too soon. I know you've built a life for yourself that doesn't need complicating. But there's land for sale adjacent to your property, the old Peterson place. I'm considering buying it. You want to be a farmer? She asked, genuinely surprised. A smile touched his lips. Rancher, maybe. I grew up on a cattle ranch in Colorado. Know more about that than law enforcement, truth be told. He took a deep breath. What I'm trying to say, Pearlie, is that I'd like the chance to see where this might go between us. No pressure, no expectations. Just possibility. Zara felt dizzy with conflicting emotions: hope, fear, longing, doubt. The children are wonderful, he finished. And clearly adore you. I would never presume to replace their father. But maybe, in time, they could find room for someone else who cares about them. About you. From inside the house came the sound of Lucy's laughter, followed by Emma's patient voice helping with bedtime preparations. The familiar sounds of her family, the family she'd fought so hard to protect and provide for alone. "I don't know what to say," Zara admitted finally. "I never expected this." "You don't need to say anything now," Archer assured her. "I just wanted you to know where I stand, what I'm thinking. The Peterson place needs work, would take me months to get it habitable. Plenty of time for us both to figure things out." The generosity of the space he was offering her to process these unexpected feelings touched Zara deeply. For 3 years, she'd lived in a state of constant vigilance, decisions made from necessity rather than choice. The luxury of time to consider her heart's desires was almost overwhelming. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding." Archer nodded, standing to leave as the last light faded from the sky. "I should go. It's a long ride back to town." "You could stay," Zara offered impulsively. "In the barn. It's too dark for safe travel." Something warm flickered in his eyes. "Thank you. I'd appreciate that." As she watched him walk toward the barn, Zara felt as though she stood on the edge of something monumental, a life no longer defined solely by struggle and survival, but by possibility. It terrified her. And yet, for the first time in years, it also filled her with hope. Spring bloomed across the Colorado Territory, bringing with it new growth and renewal. On the Morgan homestead, the transformation was particularly evident, not just in the flourishing garden and newly planted fields, but in the homestead itself. The bullet holes had been patched, windows replaced, the porch repaired and expanded. Fresh paint brightened the main house, and a new corral extended from the barn to accommodate the small herd of cattle now grazing in the north pasture. Most significant, however, was the activity at the neighboring Peterson property, where construction on a new ranch house was well underway. Archer had been true to his word, purchasing the land and dividing his time between establishing his ranch and helping Zara with improvements to her own place. Their relationship had developed slowly, cautiously shared meals, practical assistance, conversations on the porch after the children were asleep. Archer never pushed, never presumed, but his steady presence became a comfort Zara hadn't realized she'd been missing. The children, for their part, had embraced him wholeheartedly. Liam followed him like a shadow whenever possible, soaking up knowledge about horses and cattle. Lucy brought him wildflowers and special rocks she found, which he accepted with the gravity they deserved. Even Emma, initially the most reserved, had warmed to him after he spent hours helping her build a proper henhouse and taught her to whittle simple figures from wood. On this particular Sunday, Zara stood at her kitchen window, watching as Archer demonstrated to the children how to properly groom a horse. His patience seemed infinite, his encouragement genuine. She found herself smiling at the scene, a smile that quickly turned self-conscious when he glanced up and caught her watching. Later, after a shared midday meal, Archer suggested a walk to check the creek's water level after recent rains. The children, engrossed in a game of their own invention, barely noticed their departure. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the spring sunshine warm on their faces. The creek was indeed higher than usual, but not dangerously so. "The new house should be finished within a month," Archer remarked as they stood on the bank. "Roof goes on next week." "You've made remarkable progress," Zara acknowledged. "Though I still think you're being ambitious with that stone fireplace." He chuckled. "Probably. But winter nights get cold out here. Worth the extra effort." Something in his tone made her glance at him. "You're really committed to staying, aren't you? No regrets about giving up the badge?" "None," he said firmly. "This is where I want to be." After a moment, he added more softly, "Where I need to be." The implication hung between them, the unspoken acknowledgement that his choice had as much to do with her as with the land itself. "Archer," Zara began hesitantly, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." "Anything." "That night, when you told me why you were hunting the Blackwells, you mentioned your nephew living with your parents in Denver. Have you written to them about your plans?" A shadow crossed his face. "I have." They're surprised but supportive. Mother always wanted me to settle down. He paused. They've asked to visit, once the house is finished. To see the place. And to meet you and the children, if you're comfortable with that. I'd like that, Zara said, surprised to realize how much she meant it. Your nephew James, how is he? Better. The nightmares have lessened. Having my parents' stability has helped. Archer skipped a stone across the creek's surface. He asks about the men who killed his parents. It'll be good to finally tell him they've faced justice. Zara watched the ripples spread across the water. Children are remarkably resilient. More than we give them credit for. Like their mother, Archer said quietly. She looked up at him, suddenly acutely aware of how close they stood, how alone they were in this peaceful spot away from watchful eyes. Zara, he said, his voice deepening. May I kiss you? The question, so respectful and yet so intimate, sent a thrill through her. In answer, she stepped closer, tilting her face up to his. His lips met hers gently at first, then with growing certainty, as she responded. His hands came to rest lightly at her waist, and hers found their way to his shoulders. It was a kiss of discovery, of promise, of possibilities long denied finally acknowledged. When they parted, Zara found herself breathless, heart racing like a girl's rather than a widow of 32. I've wanted to do that for months, Archer admitted, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. What took you so long? She teased, surprising herself with her boldness. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch reverent. I needed to be sure you were ready. That we both were. The consideration in this, his understanding of her need to move at her own pace, only deepened her growing feelings for him. And now? She asked. No, he said, taking her hands in his. I think it's time I made my intentions clear. I love you, Zara Morgan. I love your strength, your determination, your kindness. I love the way you've raised those children, the home you've built. I want to be part of that, not to take over or change what you've created, but to stand beside you, to help shoulder the burdens and share the joys. Tears welled in Zara's eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. Archer, you don't have to answer now, he hurried to add. I know it's a lot to consider, especially for the children. Take all the time you need. But Zara shook her head, blinking back tears. I don't need more time. These past months, watching you with my children, seeing your commitment to building something here, I've come to rely on you in ways I never thought I would rely on anyone again after Thomas died. It terrified me at first. And now? He asked, hope evident in his voice. Now I realize that strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about having the courage to open your heart again, even knowing the risks. She squeezed his hands. I love you too, Archer. And so do my children. The joy that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He pulled her close, kissing her again with a newfound certainty, a promise of the future they might build together. When they returned to the house, hand in hand, the children looked up from their game with curious expressions. Come here, all of you, Zara called, gathering them on the porch. Mr. Hayes and I have something to discuss with you. Emma, perceptive as always, glanced at their joined hands and then at their faces. A slow smile spread across her features. Are you getting married? She asked directly. Archer coughed in surprise while Zara laughed. That's what we wanted to talk about, she confirmed. How would you feel if Mr. Hayes became part of our family? Would you live here? Liam asked Archer practically. Well, I'd still finish building my house, Archer explained. But yes, eventually we'd all be together. Either here or there, depending on what makes the most sense for everyone. Would you be our pa? Lucy asked, wide-eyed. The question hung in the air, weighted with significance. Zara held her breath, watching Archer carefully. He knelt down to Lucy's level, his expression serious. I would be honored to be a father to you, he said gently. But I also know you had a father who loved you very much. I wouldn't ever want to replace him in your hearts. I'd hope to be. In addition to your family, not a replacement for anyone. Lucy considered this solemnly before nodding. I think that would be all right. Liam was already grinning. Does this mean you'll teach me to rope cattle? And shoot? When you're older? Zara interjected firmly, though she was smiling too. All eyes turned to Emma, the oldest and most thoughtful of the children. She studied Archer's face for a long moment before speaking. You make Mama smile, she said finally. She didn't smile much before you came. And you don't treat us like we're burdens or in the way. She glanced at her mother. I think it would be good. For all of us. Zara felt tears threatening again at her daughter's perceptiveness. Are you sure, sweetheart? Emma nodded decisively. Yes. But I want to keep our name. Morgan. To remember Papa. Of course. Archer agreed immediately. That's important. A moment of silence fell as they all absorbed the significance of what had just transpired. Then Lucy tugged at Archer's sleeve. If you marry Mama, will we get more brothers and sisters? She asked innocently. Zara felt heat rush to her face while Archer looked momentarily speechless. Lucy! Emma scolded, though she too looked curious about the answer. Archer recovered first, a smile tugging at his lips as he met Zara's eyes. That would be something for your mother and me to discuss, he said diplomatically. But I've always thought big families were a blessing. The implications of his words of a future with possibly more children, of a home filled with even more love and chaos than they already had, sent a warm glow through Zara's chest. The life she'd never dared hope for after Thomas died suddenly seemed not just possible but imminent. All right then, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling within her. It seems we're all in agreement. Mr. Hayes Archer is going to become part of our family. The children cheered, even Emma joining in the celebration. As Liam and Lucy danced around the porch, Archer slipped his arm around Zara's waist, drawing her close. Are you sure? He murmured, just for her ears. This is happening rather faster than I expected. Zara leaned into his embrace, watching her children's joy with a full heart. I've spent 3 years making every decision alone, carrying every burden. I'm ready to share the load and the joy with someone who understands what that means. I do understand, he promised. And I ain't just loving you, he added softly, nodding toward the children. I'm loving them too. All of you together. The phrase struck Zara with its perfect simplicity, its acknowledgement that love wasn't divisible but multiplicative. That in opening her heart to Archer, she wasn't diminishing her love for her children or betraying Thomas's memory, but rather expanding the circle of love that sustained them all. That's exactly what I needed to hear, she whispered, resting her head against his shoulder as they watched the children's impromptu celebration. The wedding took place in early summer, a simple ceremony in the meadow between the two properties. The whole town turned out. Marshal Davis stood as Archer's best man, Mrs. Abernathy wept openly throughout the proceedings, and even the crusty shopkeeper from the mercantile appeared with a polished silver teapot as a gift. Zara wore a new dress of pale blue, with wildflowers in her hair placed there by Lucy's careful hands. Emma walked beside her, carrying more flowers, while Liam proudly bore the simple gold rings on a small cushion sewn by neighbors. Archer, standing tall in a new black suit, watched her approach with such naked adoration that whispers of approval rippled through the assembled guests. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up startled birds from nearby trees. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with tables set up under the cottonwoods, music from fiddles and harmonicas, and more food than Zara had seen in one place since before the war. As darkness fell and lanterns were lit, she found herself in a quiet moment with her new husband, watching their guests dance and laugh. Happy? Archer asked, his arms secure around her waist. More than I thought possible, she admitted, leaning against him. Though I'm a bit concerned about Mrs. Abernathy's enthusiasm for organizing our household. She's already rearranged my kitchen twice. Archer chuckled. She means well. And she's been lonely since her husband passed. I think she's adopted all of us. She's welcome to, Zara said warmly. The children can never have too many people who care about them. As if summoned by their conversation, Lucy appeared before them, yawning widely despite her obvious attempts to stay awake for the entire celebration. Time for bed, I think, Zara said, bending to scoop up her daughter. But it's a party, Lucy protested weakly, her eyes already drooping. And it's been a very big day, Archer added, lifting her easily into his arms. How about I tell you a story while your mama says goodnight to our guests? Lucy nodded sleepily, resting her head on his shoulder with complete trust. The sight of them together, her daughter and this man who had so seamlessly become part of their lives, filled Zara with a contentment that went bone deep. Later, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep in their beds, Zara and Archer stood on the porch of what was now their shared home, gazing up at stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. What are you thinking? Archer asked, his arms encircling her from behind. That I never imagined this, she answered honestly. After Thomas died, I thought my life would always be defined by struggle and loss. That the best I could hope for was to keep the children fed and safe. She turned in his embrace to face him. I never dreamed I might find joy again. Or love. You deserve both, he said fiercely. You and the children. So do you, she countered, reaching up to touch his face. After everything you've been through, the losses you've suffered, we all deserve this second chance. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, a husband's kiss rather than a suitor's, confident in his right to express his desire, his love. Zara responded in kind, her body awakening to sensations long forgotten, needs long suppressed. Mrs. Hayes, he murmured against her lips. I believe it's time I escorted you to our bedroom. The name, her new name, symbol of her new life, sent a thrill through her. I believe you're right, Mr. Hayes. Hand in hand, they went inside, closing the door on the starlit night, and opening the door to their future together, a future neither had dared hope for, yet both had found in the most unexpected of circumstances. 5 years later, Zara Hayes stood on the expanded porch of their home, watching the activity in the yard with a contented smile. The Hayes Morgan Ranch, as they named their combined properties, had flourished beyond their most optimistic expectations. The cattle operation Archer had established now employed 3 full-time hands, while Zara's expanded gardens and orchards yielded enough to sell surplus at the growing Willow Creek market. Emma, now 13 and showing signs of becoming a beauty like her mother, was helping her brother's 10-year-old Liam and his twin Lucy construct an elaborate fort from scrap lumber. The newest additions to the family, 3-year-old Adam and 1-year-old Alice, played in a shaded pen nearby, supervised by Mrs. Abernathy, who had indeed become an honorary grandmother to all the Hayes Morgan children. From the direction of the barn came Archer's distinctive whistle, followed by the sound of hoofbeats. He appeared moments later, leading a magnificent pinto pony with a ribbon tied to its bridle. The older children abandoned their fort building instantly, racing toward him with excited shouts. Even from a distance, Zara could see the way Archer's face lit up at their approach, the pure, uncomplicated joy he took in their happiness. Remember, she heard him telling them as they crowded around the pony. This is for all of you to share. Emma gets first lessons since she's oldest, but everyone will have a turn. Even me? Little Adam called, toddling toward them as fast as his legs would carry him. When you're bigger, Archer promised, scooping him up easily. For now you can ride with me or your mama. As if sensing her gaze, Archer looked up toward the house, his eyes finding hers across the yard. 5 years of marriage had only deepened the connection between them, weathering the challenges of blending their lives, expanding their family, and building their ranch through seasons of drought and plenty. He said something to the children, then made his way toward the porch, still carrying Adam. What do you think? He asked, nodding toward the pony now being thoroughly examined by the older children. Worth the trip to Denver? They're thrilled, Zara confirmed. Though you realize none of us will hear about anything else for weeks. Small price to pay. He set Adam down to run back to his siblings, then pulled Zara into a loose embrace. Speaking of Denver, I have news. My parents are definitely coming for Christmas, and they're bringing James. That's wonderful! Zara exclaimed. At 15, Archer's nephew had visited several times, forming a special bond with Emma despite their age difference. The children will be ecstatic. There's more, Archer continued, a hint of excitement in his voice. The railroads confirmed it'll be laying track through Willow Creek next spring. Town council's already talking about building a proper station. Once it's completed, Denver will be just a day's journey instead of a week's. That's going to change everything. Zara mused, thinking of the implications for their ranch, for the town, for the territory as a whole. For the better, I think, Archer said. We'll be able to get our cattle to market more efficiently, have access to more supplies. The children will have more opportunities as they grow. Zara nodded, though a small part of her felt nostalgic for the wilder, more isolated life they'd known. Progress was inevitable, she knew, but it brought both benefits and costs. What's that look? Archer asked, reading her expression with the ease of long intimacy. Just thinking about how much has changed. How much will continue to change. She gestured toward their expanded home, the thriving ranch, their growing family. Sometimes I can hardly believe this is our life now. Archer's arms tightened around her. Having second thoughts about any of it? Not for a moment, she assured him, leaning into his embrace. Just appreciating how far we've come. How unlikely it all was. Unlikely but inevitable, he countered, brushing a kiss against her temple. From the moment I saw you standing in your doorway with that Winchester, I knew you were extraordinary. Everything that followed just confirmed it. From the yard came a chorus of childish calls, demanding their attention for the important matter of naming the new pony. Zara laughed, stepping out of Archer's embrace but keeping hold of his hand. Duty calls, Mr. Hayes. Indeed it does, Mrs. Hayes. As they walked together toward their children, their family, Zara felt the familiar wave of gratitude that often overtook her in such moments. For the home they'd built, the love they'd found, the future they continued to forge together. Against all odds, a widow who'd given up on love and a lawman haunted by loss had found in each other not just companionship or comfort, but a true partnership, one that encompassed not just their love for each other, but for the children who completed their family. I love you, she said simply, squeezing his hand. Archer's smile was as warm and certain as the day he'd first told her his feelings by the creek. And I love you, he replied. All of you. It was enough. It was everything.